Amongst peoples?
Yeah,
Oh yes,
yeah.
yeah, very much. Their faces are almost the same. You can see in my face. Yes.
So we're at the house of Mahui and Matu, and this is the first two ladies we're interviewing for this trip, and we're currently having a conversation where they're opening up a little bit about their tattoos. It's pretty exciting.
Yes. And this is all the tattoos, yeah? Yeah.
No tattoo.
My Tattoos of Asia project began in 2016 with a short trip to Myanmar to live for a month with the Laitu people, more commonly known as the Chin tribe in Rakhine State. From there, I expanded it to cover more of the different tattooed peoples of Asia and developed a real interest in cultural tattooing and the history that went with it. So far for this project, I have visited Myanmar, Taiwan, the Lao PDR, India, and for this trip, I went back to Myanmar to visit the Naga peoples living there. Getting to the Naga Self Administered Zone in Myanmar is quite a journey in and of itself. So start early and we just drive and drive and drive until we reach our destination. And we ended up driving about 2 days.
It's 4 a.m. We're sipping on a cup of chin coffee, getting ready to head out. Not feeling good.
Google Maps doesn't have maps of the area. Many of the roads and villages are simply not on there. The army is not willing to provide you with details of where all the villages are. Even if you do all of the research, there's really no telling when you actually arrive who is going to be there, who might still be alive, who will be willing to talk to you.
We've just left our guest house to try and find our first tattooed face for the trip. So, exciting. We have no real idea where we're going. We've heard that the people live this way and we're off to try and find them.
So it's a case of asking a village chief or a local driver or somebody like that and getting where a village might possibly be, the direction that it will be, and just driving, getting there and seeing who you can find, what you can find, starting with the chief. Sometimes the journeys between town and town or village and village were multiple hours or even a full day, and so there was always this sort of fear and anticipation of what the next road was going to be like. Every single time we asked, where is the next village? Somebody would tell us it was an hour down the road. Somebody would tell us it was 2.5 hours down the road. And then it would start raining and it would be 12 hours down the road. There were times when, we'd arrive at a river that we hadn't been told about and we'd have to wait for a ferry that really only crossed the river when it was profitable for the guy driving it. The views at times were absolutely spectacular. So even after 3 or 4 hours of bouncing around and hitting our heads into the side of the car, we got to stop and just take in these beautiful mountains.
So I'm thinking I might try and do a panoramic of this. We've got some awesome clouds today since it's been raining.
Naga villages are extremely structured from the top down, and so you really need to gain the trust of the person in power before you'll really be accepted to just walk around the village and meet the people you want to meet. And once that was done, oftentimes the chief will take you to the first house. The next challenge would be to be able to get this person on our side and willing to open up to me and talk to me about their own personal history, the things that they had done in their childhood, their tattoos, potentially going into battle and returning with an enemy's head or something like that. And so I brought along a small printed book of photographs of the different tribes that I'd worked with over the course of the years of doing this project and handed that to my translators and guides and basically had them flip through that with our subject and explain the project over and over again to everybody that we met so that we could get them to open up to me, tell me their stories, and be willing to sit with us for more than just a couple of quick snapshots. I never really want to just make a picture of somebody without knowing who they are and what I can put into that picture or the story that I can tell with that picture for this project.
We just arrived in our next village, and we've met a man who's probably 90 plus and has an awesome tattoo all the way down here with like a necklace style tattoo. What you can tell him maybe is that we would like to get a picture of him with his tattoo and tell his story like this. Yeah, he will be in the book. Yeah.
A good example of that would be a former headhunter named Naren, and he ended up having one of the most beautiful examples of his people's tattoo that we got to see. And he was, quite amicable and really wanted to talk to us, and he was happy to express all the things that he wanted to express, but also answer the questions that I had to ask. He actually launched into the full story about him going on a headhunt as a younger man, protecting his village, coming back a hero, and how that made him feel like a legend in his village and how he really misses the days of being respected by his juniors.
Narang. Bati subung itu tebi dete. Bati subung ngotute. Bitu toba. Datang amin narang ngapace. Kaya mintay ko lang. Nuksa ngong pacing jang ngapace at ngadam na kaya nga ato nga. Panguga mong may. Siyang mong may ngong pacing jang ngapace ate.
We'll have him looking at me for this one. That's okay. He's got it. Yep. Okay, jump out for me. You're blocking the light. Thank you. Okay, that's good. Really, really good. Now, I'm going to have you look right here for me.
One of the most challenging things on the ground is actually communication with my subjects. We could never really avoid the fact that we were going to be a bit of a spectacle. People take a big interest in me being there. So I'm a foreigner visiting their villages, and I'm trying to interview a single person. One day I was in a small village interviewing a lady about her tattoo and her personal experience, which is the sort of stories that I'm trying to get to. And her husband came to join us, and he began speaking as well. And then we had 2 or 3 more village men, and they came and they began speaking.
Yeah, so one of the things that we come across quite often in villages is that it's quite difficult to translate because people only speak their own local dialect or their own local language, and so you need someone from the village to translate into something more palatable to the rest of us, and then we translate from there, and that often ends up being a bit of a too many cooks in the kitchen kind of situation where the actual interviewee doesn't get a chance to speak because everybody's sort of debating what she did or didn't say, and or trying to extrapolate it so that it's understandable in the target language that we're trying to translate from. So it becomes difficult to continue a good interview, and people tend to just shut down.
While men of the various Naga tribes like Naren were given tattoos for their social status or their deeds in battle, women were tattooed for a variety of other reasons. And they were often tattooed a lot younger, often as children or even babies. So in the case of a Makuri woman, Laiseshi, she actually told us that she was given her tattoo to allow her to be recognized in the afterlife by her ancestors and to be able to eat plentifully with them while she was there. So for her, it was more about ensuring that she would have a good life after she died, rather than being recognized in this life as a powerful person. In the case of Yonkwan women, they were actually tattooed at even sometimes 7 or 8 months of age. So they were tattooed as babies, and being able to get a story about that time was a little bit difficult. Obviously, I don't have memory of that time. And so we had to rely on learning a little more about their experiences with that tattoo later in life, or even now, as to how people in the outside world react to them with their tattoo, and how that's influenced the way that they see themselves and their own cultural legacy. So for many of the women being tattooed at such a young age, even if they weren't babies, memories of that time were often difficult to access. And so that was one of the things that we had a little bit of difficulty with when actually interviewing these ladies was being able to get specifics of their story and being able to actually tell their story, because they themselves don't remember the exact details of that day, and it often had to be filled in by other people who might have memories of it, or filled in by interviewing 3 or 4 different ladies and putting together the pieces of those memories to make a coherent story. When it comes time to actually photograph the person, there's a lot of things that go through my mind. First of all, there's the style of the project. I do use strobe lighting to make sure, first of all, that I can shoot at any time of day, because I never really know when I'm going to be able to meet these people, and I'd like to be able to control the light to make sure there's a consistent quality in the project. But the other part of that is that strobe light is a very new modern technology, and it brings this ancient idea of tattooing for animistic purposes, or for the ranking in society based on how successful you were in war. It definitely brings that into the modern world and gives us that link between culture, history, and the fact that these people are very much alive in 2020 or 2021 as we are now. There's also a responsibility with any portrait photograph to make sure that you're not taking advantage of the subject, that you are working with them to try and tell some sort of truth about that person, not exploit them in any way. So I always try to take cues from the interview that I do with these people. So not always can I get the exact nuances of the things that they're saying, because oftentimes translations are made through 2 or 3 different languages, but I'm able to take cues from their mood, their demeanor, the way that they answer the questions, the sorts of things they open up with to me. And I can take those cues and make an image that tries to represent, did they tell me a funny story? Were they laughing about their past with this tattoo and the pain that they went through? Or were they very serious about it? I can take those small cues and try to put them into the portrait that I make. There's one village that really sticks out in my memory from this trip, and that is the village of Santone. And when we arrived, we were overlooking a traditional Naga village. So some of the villages in the area have sort of adapted to the modern construction style, but this one was very much a single path going across the ridge of a mountain with houses on either side. It's sort of easy to defend in the historical battles that would have happened for these people. The first man that we met as we climbed the hill was actually a man named Tainkhaw, who had been a fairly high-ranking, possibly a king of the village in the past. We had met him and been invited into his house, and he was very welcoming, and he invited a few of the men from the village to come and sit with us around the fire. And he gave us a bit of information about who he was and his history, his people's history. And when we were talking about his tattoo, it was pretty interesting that he said that in the past he needed this to be recognized by his neighboring villages for people to know who he was, but he wasn't really worried that his grandkids would never get this tattoo, because now they have a national Myanmar ID, which actually has their tribe name on it, so they don't have to worry about being recognized anymore. He was a really interesting character, and he also had a really interesting house because of his wealth. So he had a whole lot of skulls on the wall from the buffalo, the mitun, the local buffalo that he had sacrificed in different festivals in the village. And so I made a portrait of him sitting by his fire in front of those, and we also made the portrait of his tattoo itself. So that was a really positive day for me, because I think it was the first time on the journey that I had felt that I was getting somewhere, that I'd met someone who was opening up an interesting subject that I could talk to and make an interesting photograph of.
Kajing pipila kaya pipila ke Tainkhaw ke nyuginya ko bunyo. Kipine klapine ta ku tiang la te ke rolong ku lam la tap ke se hab kum tho. Je shuti mate. Long Chaka.
We just wrapped up our last interview and photo in Sinthay Village of the Kuka people. They were our last group of people to visit. And it's sort of a mixed bag with how I feel about this. I feel like maybe we could have gone a little deeper with some of these things if we'd had a few more opportunities with locals that had a bit more knowledge and knew, you know, the customs and cultures and how to get people talking a little better. And, you know, but it's also, you know, I'm happy because we're now one trip away from essentially wrapping up this project that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years or so. So exhausted is a good word for what we are right now. And yeah, getting ready to fly back to Yangon and spend a few days looking at the work that we've done.
On the 12+ hour journey back out of the mountains and down to the airport, I had plenty of time to consider the things that I'd learned, the people that I'd met, the interviews that I'd done, and the photos that I'd made. I felt really great about learning more about the headhunting culture of the Naga peoples, learning that tattoos could be your ticket into the afterlife or be your ticket into wealth after you passed from this world. It was great to, you know, be welcomed into homes and sit down and have dinner with local people and enjoy the stories that they had to tell. But as with any journey, there were the pangs of regret, the things that I didn't ask, or the photos that I didn't take, or the things that I didn't learn. So very much looking forward to being able to get back into the Naga Self Administered region and learn more about these people. When you finally get to sit with these people and listen to their stories and have somebody open up to you, I've only just arrived in a village. I'm a stranger, I'm somebody they don't know, and they're willing to sit there with me, share their time, share their stories, and tell me about their life. That sort of thing makes all of the other little difficulties and all of the lack of being able to plan worth it.